We need to stop participating in white supremacy. We need to stop reinforcing the bars of our own incarceration. See, because one thing you get to notice once you can see through the illusion is just how incredibly fragile this entire system of white supremacy is, right? Because it takes an incredible amount of people to uphold it. And the very size of that operation is both its strength and its weakness. And even though most people in the world today are still mesmerized and enchanted by the propaganda and the illusion of the matrix, so much so that they are living in a somnolent reality, that is, they are basically sleepwalking. The real handmaidens of the front line of empire are self-aware. They are lucidly feral, predatory, and imperial, and so are always having to struggle with the cognitive dissonance of the inverted reality that white supremacy has crafted. And so much of it is just posturing. And because they imagine that their narrative, the veil of illusion that they have cast upon the whole world, is total and absolute, they dare you to break character, to speak truth, to name reality, because they are hoping that if you do so, it will make you appear insane.
Meanwhile, here's what the Iranian foreign minister told Fox News yesterday.
For 10 days, it was peaceful, legal demonstrations and protests for economic shortcomings. But after that 10 days, for 3 days, we had completely different story. A terrorist operation, when terrorist elements led from outside, entered these, protests. They wanted to increase the number of deaths. Why? Because President Trump has said that if there are killings, he would intervene. And they wanted to drag him into this conflict. And that was exactly an Israeli plot.
So that's the position of the regime. So has this uprising been crushed, and what comes next? Do you think that he told, Trump and the administration via Fox or otherwise that in order to head off military intervention?
No, he was telling the truth. And I believe your framing is completely inaccurate. And Iran is not a regime. You do not call Saudi Arabia or the Emirates, which are family states.
Anyway, do you know what, Mr. Morandi?
You don't call them regime.
My show, I will use the terminology. I'm just trying to ask you some questions. I understand your position. Have the protests been crushed?
No, that's another framing that you're using. There were no protests that were crushed. On the first 2 days after the currency dropped, and it was American manipulation in neighboring countries that brought down the currency, 30 to 40%. And we had protests on the streets, and I know you know this, and there were no arrests, and no one was harassed. Not like in the UK, where people who hold placards against genocide are arrested, or in Germany, where they wear keffiyehs in sympathy to the Palestinians and they're battered on the streets. There were no arrests. Then afterwards, 2-3 days later, there was infiltration by rioters, and many of them held guns and knives, and there's footage of this. If anyone looks at my Twitter feed, it's full of these people. They attacked police stations. They killed police officers in police stations. They murdered 100 police officers and a bit over 300 officers of the law, including volunteers. Yesterday, we had a mass funeral in Tehran for 100 of them. But the narrative in the West is somehow that these are peaceful protests. The Israeli regime put out a Persian tweet, and you know Persian, put out a Persian tweet or a statement saying that our people are on the ground. The Mossad said that. Pompeo, who was the head of the CIA, said Mossad's on the ground. Channel 14 of Israel said 2 days ago, and it's a tweet. They said that weapons were brought in from a foreign government. Guess who it is? And that's why hundreds of officers in Iran were murdered. The Israelis are saying this, but somehow Western media is all ignoring it because it's disrupting this fake narrative that these were just peaceful protesters.
Mr. Murray.
Once you go behind the scenes, once truth pierces the veil and you see the process by which the sausage of imperialism is made, the illusion collapses and you can no longer respect any of its institutions. Not the colleges that train them, the Harvards, the Oxfords, not the institutes that hire them, the mainstream media, the CNNs and the BBCs, and not the institutions that reward them, the Pulitzers, the Nobels, none of it, because you can see them for what they truly are, as part of this huge, gigantic infrastructure that upholds empire. Amanpour is a smart woman. She knows it's a regime change operation. She knows it's a question of sovereignty and subjugation. She knows it's an imperial struggle. She's a liar. She's a handmaiden of empire who wakes up each day to uphold and perpetuate the violence of empire. It's a global narrative war, and she's attempting in real time a reinforcement of the bars of our collective illusion. She's daring him to pierce the veil of what she assumes is a global common consensus.
The system in
What's the worst thing about Xi Jinping, in your view?
It's, look, about the Winnie the Pooh, yeah, everybody's keep talking about. Why is being so childish to your national leader? James,
no, but what's the worst thing about the worst thing about him?
In the UK, you have freedom of speech, right?
Yeah, I do want you to answer my question.
No, but James, what has he changed?
What's the worst thing about Xi Jinping?
Nothing. I can't see. I don't see. He stands so much for the people.
But I mean, is he perfect? Do you think?
No, no one is perfect.
So name one of his imperfections.
Why would I do that?
Because I'm asking you to.
No, I wouldn't. I don't think.
Well, just say something bad about somebody in the Chinese government.
You doing this? Why we having a?
This is James O'Brien. James cosplays as a progressive, but he's really not a progressive. He's just one side of the two sides of a controlled media apparatus of the West that is necessary to capture dissent. I'm going to do a longer video about James, about how the West have mastered the balance of this existential contradiction, right? That is inherent in the human experience by anchoring that contradiction in an absolute violence from which they can now project an illusion of choice and freedom. But what James is doing here is wielding that baton of freedom of speech as the hallmark of liberal democracy. The SI unit that the West has gaslit the entire world into believing is the ultimate measure of a free society. James is a smart man though. What James fails to mention is that in a society that is underpinned by the violence of the state and the absolute and total capture of both the state and the media by capital, then you can have all the freedom that you want and still not have any change in your material reality. You can insult Keir Starmer and Donald Trump all you want. They are still not going to increase your minimum wage for 10 years. They are still going to allow corporations poison your rivers. They are still going to allow corporations to pay you 1% interest on your deposit and charge you 25% on your credit card. They are still going to send all your money to the Middle East so that another nation can exterminate children. But yes, you can throw Keir Starmer and cuss him out at the bar, at the pub at Bat, right? But in the material reality of a belligerent actor in a world that is anarchic, that is only war and conquest, what does an unbridled freedom do to a population that is trying to defend its sovereignty? This is what it does. It allows the imperialists unbridled access into the mind space of your population so that they can sow discord. Look what they've done to Nigeria. At the point where Nigerians were supposed to unite to contest what was clearly a stolen election, they split us with tribalism. Look what they did with South Africa. At the point where their election was stolen, right, and they had started making noises about taking back their lands, they turned their attention to Nigerians and other Africans as the source of their problems, not the apartheid states that they still live in. And if we had a government in Africa that was serious about our sovereignty and tried to defend us from the Trojan horse of Western-controlled digital apps, all the local NGOs will be crying freedom of speech is under threat. But of course, they will be doing this with money from American think tanks and philanthropists. This is the true nature of the invasion that they deploy upon us, right? This is how the West has mastered these eternal contradictions, as they know that from that absolute violence and control of their societies, they can project the illusion of peace and chaos, and that to defend against that attack, the targeted society will be forced to restrict some rights while defending a real peace, the real peace and the real existential freedoms. right? And it's not that we can't have both freedoms of peace and of speech. It is that in that fundamental existentialist interaction between populations, one side has chosen an extreme of a superficial peace that is underpinned by an absolute violence, and so has forced all the rest of the world to the other side of a superficial violence that is mostly deployed in service of a more existential peace. It's the law of polarity, of duality. It's the illusion of separation, right? That is merely extremes of the same state of being.
President Nagawa, I wonder what lessons you've been in the government of Zimbabwe for decades in various roles, including through a very turbulent period where your predecessor famously kicked out the whites and then the economy tanked and now it's rising again. I wonder if you would summarize the lessons that your country has learned from that experience.
I'm not so sure what you have in mind. But let me say, our economy has faced challenges. I'm sure you're aware.
Yes.
Zimbabwe has been under sanctions for decades as a result of us claiming our land from the British and making ourselves independent. We seized the land and gave it to our people. So sanctions were imposed on us. But in spite of all that constraint we have developed, and we are happy that we have developed on our own, and we feel very independent.
Well, some of the land was seized from people who were born there. So I wonder if there's a lesson about targeting people on the basis of their skin color. Do you think?
Can I hear you?
Well, people had their land seized in Zimbabwe who were born in Zimbabwe, and they were targeted on the basis of their race. And I wonder if you think that's good or bad.
No. Land did not belong to a race. It belonged to Zimbabweans. Right. So when the colonialists took land from us, time came when we asserted ourselves, take back our land. And those who wanted to have land at the same basis as the African people of Zimbabwe remained. But those who felt they were superior left.
Okay.
Do I need to comment about this? We all know that this idiot is a racist, just another handmaiden of empire. He's not broken from the establishment. Don't let him deceive you. He's like James O'Brien. He's controlled dissent. Tucker Carlson is a smart man. He knows what restorative justice looks like. He knows you cannot come to another continent and take my land, build laws after the fact to protect your theft, and then suddenly become a victim when I violate those laws to take back my inheritance and restore it to my people. He understands this, but he's daring these leaders to speak truth, right? To describe the shape of reality, to pierce that veil of the global propaganda and risk sounding insane, or agree with his narrative and then reinforce the bars of our collective illusion. And so we must stop participating in white supremacy, because the truth will literally set us free. The emperor is naked, and once a babe who is yet to be corrupted by fear or profit declares it, it gives courage to others to do the same. And so we must seek out always the knowledge and discernment that will allow us to speak truth. For in truth will this veil of illusion be ripped and violence forced out into the open. And in that inevitable confrontation that must occur, right, once the nature of this beast is unmasked, in that primal existentialist struggle for truth and for the soul of this planet, in that violence that has been forced upon us, perhaps we shall find opportunity to remake ourselves.
President Boko, as you look at young people in Botswana who are educated and energetic, what's your pitch to them? What's your argument to them to stay in Botswana, not go to South Africa, Europe, the United States?
Young people are generally innovative. They are entrepreneurial. They now have become digital natives, and that presents immense opportunities to them. These opportunities mean they can pretty much operate wherever they are, and they must, as a matter of course, remain within Botswana so that they can then spread their reach and influence to every part from Botswana. And so the opportunities that there are in Botswana, the training, the education, the acquisition of skills, the support, the environment that nurtures them and feeds and fuels their verve and vitality is what Botswana offers and what will power Africa. Africa generally is a very young continent with a median age of 19.3. Botswana's median age is 25. And so with such a population, Africa is poised to rule the world.
So what are your plans for the world once you rule it?
To make it fairer, to make it more equitable, to ensure that intellectual property is internalized in every part of the African continent, that innovation serves humanity, not just a predatory elite, and that everybody can partake equitably and benefit from the fruits of the economy and the vast opportunities that are available in the world.